One engine helped win World War II. Another casually rolls past 500,000 miles without flinching. And then there is the one Chrysler ripped straight out of a minivan engine and bolted into a Wrangler. We are ranking every Jeep motor ever made, from best to worst. And the engine dead last on this list? When you find out where Chrysler found it, you are going to lose your mind. Number 10, the best of all time. The AMC 4.0-liter inline 6. No other engine could sit in this spot, and every Jeep owner on Earth already knows why. The 4.0-liter inline 6 showed up in 1987 inside the XJ Cherokee, and it survived nearly 20 years, 3 different corporate owners, and millions of miles of absolute abuse. AMC designed it, Chrysler refined it, Daimler Chrysler kept building it because nobody could come up with anything better. It made 190 horsepower and up to 235 pound-feet of torque. Nothing flashy on paper, but the way this engine delivered power was on another level. Smooth, usable torque right at low RPM where trail driving actually happens. Crawling over boulders, pushing through deep mud, grinding up steep inclines, the 4.0 handled all of it without drama. The reason it lasted so long comes down to dead simple engineering. Cast iron block, cast iron head, push rod valve train, no variable valve timing, no turbo, no overhead cams. Fewer moving parts meant fewer things to break, and the mileage numbers are wild. One Cherokee owner put 500,000 miles on a factory 4.0 without a rebuild. The YouTube channel I Do Cars took apart a catastrophically failed 4.0 and found the engine had been run on dirty oil for thousands of miles, rebuilt once with aftermarket parts, and it still lasted decades. The mechanic admitted these engines are very difficult to blow up. Motor Trend reviewed the 1997 Cherokee and clocked 0 to 60 in 8.2 seconds, calling the 4.0 a long-lived OHV power plant that gets people where they need to go, whether through a blizzard or up a mountainside. The best years were 1995 through 1999. The worst? Avoid 2000 through 2001, where a crack-prone cylinder head caused problems for a lot of owners. When Chrysler killed the 4.0 in 2006, one journalist wrote 6 words that still hurt. The king is dead. And what do they replace it with? Oh, we are getting to that, but you are not going to like it. Number 9. The Willys GoDevil L134 Flathead. If the 4.0 is the king, the GoDevil is the engine that built the entire kingdom. Without this motor, there is no Jeep. None of it. Designed by Willys Overland chief engineer Delmar Barney Roos in the late 1930s, the GoDevil was a 134 cubic inch flathead inline 4, making just 60 horsepower and 105 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers sound cute by modern standards, but in 1941, this was the most powerful engine of the 3 military prototypes the U.S. Army tested, and that power advantage won Willys the contract. Between 1942 and 1945, Willys and Ford cranked out over 600,000 Jeeps with this motor. They fought in North Africa, Normandy, Italy, and the Pacific. Dwight Eisenhower called the Jeep one of the 4 most important tools in winning the war. George C. Marshall called it America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. Roos designed the GoDevil for one thing above all else: reliability under the worst conditions on Earth. Low 6.48:1 compression so it could run on garbage fuel, under-square bore and stroke for maximum low-end torque, and the whole engine weighed just 365 pounds. After the war, the same motor powered the first civilian CJ-2A, and over 214,000 of those were sold. Farmers used them to plow fields, haul timber, and clear snow. Ranchers used them on terrain that would snap the axle off a regular truck. Production continued all the way until 1965. 25 straight years of service from a design created before television existed. No other engine in Jeep history carries that kind of origin story. The GoDevil did not just power a vehicle. It helped change the outcome of a global conflict, and then came home and built a brand that still exists over 80 years later. And this is only number 9. The engines that come next will shock you, but for very different reasons. Number 8. The AMC 258 Inline 6. Before the legendary 4.0 existed, there was the engine that made it possible. The 258 is the 4.0's tougher, slightly rougher, older relative, and honestly, she does not get nearly enough credit. Born in 1971, the 258 was just the AMC 232 with more stroke, bumping displacement to 4.2 liters. Cast iron block, 7 main bearings, low RPM torque monster. About 120 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque, which was nothing exciting, but every ounce of that power arrived right where off-road driving demands it. This engine powered CJ5s, CJ7s, Wagoneers, J-Series trucks, and the early YJ Wrangler. The durability stories border on mythical. One IFSJA forum member blew a fist-sized hole through the block after an oil pump failure, and the 258 still ran long enough for him to exit the highway and coast into a tire shop. The mechanics there could not process what they were looking at. The only real problem was the Carter BBD carburetor on emissions-era models. That carburetor has caused more emotional damage to Jeep owners than any other single car part in history. But the iron block underneath it? Virtually unkillable. A lot of hardcore Jeep builders will actually tell you the 258 had better bottom-end torque than the 4.0 because of its longer stroke. The 4.0 was really a modernized 258 with fuel injection bolted on top. Same tough bones, better tech. By the way, if you want your Jeep to last like the top engines on this list, everything I personally follow is in my longevity guide. Link in the description. Now let me tell you about the engine that divided the entire Jeep community. Number 7. The 3.6-liter Pentastar V6. The Pentastar has fans and it has enemies, and both sides have the receipts to back up their arguments. When this engine landed in the 2012 Wrangler, it brought 285 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque. That was 83 more horsepower than the disaster it replaced. It won a spot on Ward's 10 best engines 3 years running. Chrysler put it in everything from the Dodge Charger to the Ram ProMaster, building over 1 million Pentastars per year at peak production. But the problems are real. Early 2011 through 2013 models had left-side cylinder head failures. Valve seats would crack, causing misfires and engine damage. Chrysler extended the warranty on those heads to 10 years or 150,000 miles. Then came the rocker arm failures. Needle bearings inside the rocker arms disintegrate, chew into the camshaft, and create the Pentastar tick that haunts Jeep forums everywhere. A class action lawsuit was filed against FCA, alleging that metal debris from these failures contaminates the oil and damages every internal component it touches. And the plastic oil filter housing? It warps, it cracks, and it leaks oil onto the exhaust. Owners have reported smoke and fire risk from this failure alone. Aftermarket aluminum housings exist specifically because the factory part cannot handle its own job. But when maintained properly, plenty of owners are cruising past 200,000 miles without drama. Parts are cheap because millions of these engines exist. For daily driving with some weekend trail time, the power-to-weight ratio works. The Pentastar will never be a legend, but it gets the job done when you stay on top of its known weak spots. And compared to what came before it, the Pentastar is a massive improvement. Number 6. The Willys Hurricane F134. The Hurricane was the GoDevil's smarter, younger relative. Same 134 cubic inches, same basic block, but with an F-head valve layout that moved the intake valve up into the cylinder head for better breathing. Output jumped from 60 to 72 horsepower. It appeared in 1950 and powered the CJ3B, CJ5, CJ6, and military vehicles like the M38A1. Simple to fix, extremely tough, and perfectly suited for slow-speed trail crawling and farm work. The Hurricane bridged the gap between the wartime flathead era and the inline 6 era that came next. The only real complaint was that 72 horsepower was still pretty thin as vehicles got heavier and highway speeds climbed. You were not winning any drag races in a CJ3B. But nobody bought a CJ3B to go fast. They bought it to crawl through impossible terrain and pull equipment across muddy fields. And for that job, the Hurricane was exactly right. It stayed in production through the mid-1960s, outlapping the GoDevil and giving Jeep owners a noticeable step up in power without sacrificing the reliability they depended on. If the GoDevil was the engine that won the war, the Hurricane was the engine that won the peace. Number 5. the 2.0-liter GME turbo inline 4. A turbocharged four-cylinder in a Wrangler sounds wrong, but the numbers tell a different story. This engine showed up in 2018 for the JL Wrangler and puts out 270 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque, which is actually more torque than the 3.6 Pentastar. The twin-scroll turbo delivers peak torque at 3,000 revolutions per minute, giving strong low-end pull for off-road situations. Versions of this same engine power the Alfa Romeo Giulia and the Maserati Ghibli hybrid, so the engineering talent behind it is legitimate. One 2018 Wrangler owner hit 130,000 miles with zero engine problems. A Chrysler dealership technician posted online that he actually prefers the 2.0 turbo over the 3.6 because it comes in for repairs less often. The concerns are early 2018 and 2019 coolant leaks from improperly torqued fittings, carbon buildup on intake valves from direct injection, and the inherent complexity of a turbo system. The real question is time. The 4.0 proved itself over 20 years. This engine has been in Jeeps since 2018. Promising, but still unproven at 300,000-mile territory. And in the Jeep world, an engine does not earn respect until it has been beaten on trails for at least a decade without folding. Fuel economy is a genuine bright spot, though. Owners are regularly seeing 19 to 22 miles per gallon in mixed driving, which is dramatically better than the Pentastar. And Quadratech reported that based on regional sales data, the 2.0 turbo appears to be the most popular selling Wrangler engine right now for automatic transmission buyers. So the market is voting with its wallet, even if the forums have not fully made up their minds yet. Number 4. The Buick Dauntless 225 V6. This was a Buick engine that Kaiser Jeep adopted in 1966 for the CJ5, CJ6, and Jeepster Commando. At 225 cubic inches and 160 horsepower, it was the most powerful motor available in a CJ at the time. One Jeep forum member claimed his Dauntless V6 ran from 1966 to 2000 without major engine work. 34 years of service. The odd-fire design created a rough, uneven idle that inline-six fans would never accept, but the power and durability were there. When AMC bought Jeep from Kaiser in 1970, they retired the Buick V6 and installed their own inline-sixes. Then they sold the Dauntless tooling back to General Motors, and GM kept building versions of that same basic V6 for another 35 years. That fact alone tells you how good the design was. Number 3. The AMC 2.5-liter inline 4. And now we enter the pain zone. The 2.5 was born in 1984 when AMC engineers took the 4.2-liter six-cylinder block, bored it out, shortened the stroke, and chopped two cylinders off the middle. Same family as the legendary inline 6, same cast iron toughness, but 117 to 130 horsepower in a 3,000-plus pound vehicle? That is not enough. The engine itself was actually reliable, same rugged DNA as its six-cylinder relatives. Owners regularly pushed past 200,000 miles on nothing but oil changes and plugs. But the driving experience was rough. Highway merging required blind faith. Passing on a two-lane road needed a long runway and a short prayer. Add 31-inch tires without regearing, and the engine could barely motivate itself, let alone the vehicle. The 2.5 existed for one reason: window sticker pricing. Starting at numbers that got people onto the lot so the sales team could upsell them to the six-cylinder. It worked as a cheap motor. It just never worked as a proper Jeep motor. And the frustrating part? The bones were there. This engine shared its DNA with the 4.0, one of the most indestructible motors in American history. But chopping two cylinders off a six does not give you 2/3 of the power. It gives you half the fun and twice the frustration. The 2.5 was the friend who shows up to help you move, but only carries the light boxes. Number 2. The 3.0-liter EcoDiesel V6. The EcoDiesel promised everything Jeep owners wanted from a diesel. Built by VM Motori in Italy, it made 260 horsepower and a massive 442 pound-feet of torque. Highway fuel economy in the Grand Cherokee hit 25 to 30 miles per gallon, which for that size of truck was almost unbelievable. And then, in January 2017, the EPA accused Fiat Chrysler of using defeat devices in roughly 104,000 EcoDiesel vehicles to cheat on emissions testing. The same kind of fraud Volkswagen got caught pulling. FCA settled for over $800 million. On top of the scandal, the EcoDiesel had mechanical headaches. The exhaust gas recirculation system clogged. The diesel particulate filter confused owners with forced regeneration cycles. And repair bills were brutal because diesel parts and diesel-trained mechanics cost a premium. Great torque, great fuel economy, terrible corporate behavior, and maintenance costs that will eat you alive. A frustrating engine wrapped inside an even more frustrating controversy. The EcoDiesel was eventually pulled from the Wrangler and Gladiator lineup, and it left behind a legacy of unfulfilled potential. Jeep owners wanted a diesel option for decades, and when they finally got one, it came packaged with a federal emissions scandal and repair bills that made even V8 owners flinch. The torque was real, the fuel savings were real, but the trust was gone. And in the Jeep community, once you lose trust, you do not get it back easily. Number 1. The worst Jeep engine ever made. The 3.8-liter V6. In 2006, Chrysler killed the 4.0 inline 6. An engine that routinely lasted 300,000 miles. An engine with an entire community built around how impossible it was to destroy. And the replacement they chose for the brand new 2007 JK Wrangler? A 3.8-liter V6, originally designed in 1991 for front-wheel drive Chrysler minivans. The Dodge Caravan, the Plymouth Voyager, the Chrysler Town & Country. Those minivans. That engine. According to Wikipedia, Chrysler originally created the 3.3 and 3.8 engine family as a larger, more powerful alternative to the Mitsubishi 3.0 V6 in the minivans. The 3.8 first appeared in the 1991 Chrysler Imperial and New Yorker, then moved to minivans where it lived for 16 years before Chrysler decided it belonged in a Wrangler. On paper, the 3.8 made 202 horsepower and 237 pound-feet of torque, slightly more than the outgoing 4.0. But the power arrived up high, in the RPM range, killing the low-end torque that made the 4.0 so dominant off-road. The JK felt sluggish, strained on hills, and wheezed with the automatic transmission and larger tires. The oil consumption was even worse than the weak power. Some owners reported burning a quart every 2,000 miles. JP Magazine had two staff 2007 JKs with 3.8 engines die at just over 100,000 miles each. The teardowns revealed crystallized piston rings that crumbled apart and main bearings spun from oil starvation. The factory oil pan had zero internal baffling, so every time the Jeep tilted on a trail, which is literally the entire point of owning a Wrangler, oil sloshed away from the pickup tube and left the engine running without lubrication. Aftermarket companies had to design baffled pans to fix a flaw that should never have existed in a vehicle marketed for off-road use. The 2007 and 2008 models were the worst, with piston ring alignment problems traced to a newly opened factory in Mexico. The 2009 through 2011 versions were somewhat better after Chrysler addressed the assembly issues. One Jeep forum member summed up the entire experience by saying his 3.8 JK was a study in contrast from the best to the worst in one model year change. Another member called it the worst engine he ever owned in any vehicle, ranking it below the 2.3-liter aluminum Chevy Vega engine, which is about as harsh as automotive criticism gets. When the 3.6 Pentastar replaced the 3.8 in 2012, the relief across the Jeep community was immediate and unanimous. The 3.8 was built for a minivan. It was designed to haul groceries on smooth suburban roads, and somebody at Chrysler looked at that engine and said, "Yeah, put it in the Wrangler." That decision sits at the bottom of this ranking, and honestly, it might deserve its own category. Crazy how one engine can make or break an entire Jeep, right? Which one surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, and if you want your Jeep to last as long as the best engines on this list, my longevity guide is linked below. Subscribe for more deep dives like this. See you next time!